Good morning, everybody. In lieu of Michael being here, we're going to get started for your time. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ed, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Excellent. I just got it started. We did
I
the
really
pledge.
appreciate that.
No problem.
I joined with you in the pledge. Good morning to my colleagues. Thank you, Jeff Benson. Thank you, Jeff Benson, very much for starting. I apologize, but if anybody believes that there isn't a compelling reason for regional coordination of construction and maybe the weather, my arrival and others is evidence of that. And I thank the Vice Chair for his standing in. I appreciate it very much. Very well. We just had a call to order and the Pledge of Allegiance. I will take up the matter of the Executive Board meeting minutes.
I move we approve the minutes as presented by Mary Thorne.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as prepared by Mary Thorne. Is there any discussion by the proponents? Is there any discussion by opponents? Hearing none, as many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
As many opposed say yes. The ayes have it, the minutes are adopted. If the body will forbear me, I do want to recognize the attorney, Mr. Hollenbeck, who wants to offer a report with regard to a certification of a new member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've received communication from the town of Hebron that their appointment to NERC will henceforth be Donald Ensign. I think Donald's here. Welcome.
Welcome.
Looks familiar.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. And the certification is in proper form, and Donald is with us officially.
Thank you, Mr. Ensign, and welcome back. The next matter for our consideration on our agenda is we're going to attempt to have public comment. Is somebody provided me with the public? Thank you very much. Let's see here. It appears that Mr. Wright may be on here. David Wright? Hi, Mr. Wright. It's good to see you again. You're representing the Gary Transportation District. Would you like to stand and comment?
Yes.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. For those
Good morning.
who don't know me, I am David Wright. I'm the Planning and Marketing Manager for the Gary Public Transportation Corporation. Before I get started, I do want to introduce Siobhan. She is our Deputy General Manager. This is her first NERC meeting.
Welcome. Please stand. Welcome.
We figured we would get her started with, now that she's been here for a while, we would get her started with the really interesting things that require her job, and nursing one of them. I wanted to start off with two things. One was the certification. There was a public, the nursing certifications. There was a public meeting last night for the certification that GPDC hosted, and we put out some comments on our own. Having to do with that certification, specifically the language regarding membership. It's GPTC's opinion that GPTC and the Northern Indiana Community Transportation District, based on the language of MAP 21 and in our opinion, the FAST Act, are required to be members of the NERC board. And we provided that at the other meeting last night, and we requested that the feds provide some kind of response to the assertion that the FAST Act language satisfies the arrangement that NERC currently has. And so we respectfully disagree with that with that opinion. Secondly, I wanted to talk about a potential NERC function, and that is a leadership capacity when it comes to public transportation. In 2017 and early 2018, we will be rolling out a significant increase in transit on the Broadway corridor. Will be resulting in a 50% increase in trips. It will be adding service at the request of the town of Maryville and with the fiscal involvement of the town of Maryville. It will also be putting buses in the vicinity of the Purdue Research Center, which is much further south than we have gone as a public transportation corporation. So 2017 was planned to be a watershed year in transit growth. However, we have been forced to look into the possibility of reducing service in another part of our service area. And it is hinging, as growth is on the Broadway corridor, on local investment. GPTC had a public hearing a couple of weeks ago where the board approved the provisional suspension of service for the Lakeshore South. That's a route that we began in 2014 that filled some gaps that were created by the folding of the Regional Bus Authority. And it provides transit service from downtown Hammond to Munster and to Highland. If we wanted to eliminate that service, we would have said, hey, we are eliminating it as of immediately. Okay. Our intent is to do our best, and starting with that public hearing, to preserve that service. What we don't want to have happen is to create a quality of life reduction in Northwest Indiana, and we want to begin the conversation with the communities and other organizations that are pro-transit to get that service preserved. We would like to talk to the city of Hammond, the town of Munster, the town of Highland, and in addition, the city of Whiting on Lakeshore service, because we do have an option that includes service in Northern Hammond and Whiting. So what I'd like to ask is for the NERC Commission to, if not endorse a immediate beginning of discussions on preserving that service, which I think is very important. I think a lot of people think is very important, and maybe activate the transit committee that was talked about a few years ago to be a clearinghouse for those discussions. We've got a model for local funding. We've got an agreement. It's been executed with the town of Maryville, where they are going to be investing in the operating expenses for the Millville shuttle. Not only did they sign that agreement, they actually accompanied us when we did our test run to see where the route would be going and whether or not we needed to make any adjustments. We think that's a great partnership. We are currently in production of the vehicle that will be used on that route. And we think that's a great model for how we can preserve the Lakeshore South, maybe expand Lakeshore service to the lakefront. So I'm not sure if we need, if we're requesting official action, but what we do want to see is NERC not be on the sideline with this conversation, because if we reduce public transportation service in the northern part of the county, that's going to change the entire framework of our conformity and our air quality profile. So it could have a domino effect in Hebron or Valparaiso or Chesterton. So even though it's affecting 3 communities right now, it could have an impact on the entire region. I'm actually, if needed, I will take any questions regarding that, because I do know there are some people on the commission who did have some concerns. And I also have the handouts that we provided at our public hearing, which not only gives the reasons why we're making the changes that we're making, identifies the other changes that we're making, because it's not just this. We have to do some cost cutting across the board, but also identifies the options that local investment would realize, from preserving the Lakeshore South as it is, to creating a 2-hour route that would serve from Ridge Road in Munster and Highland up to the lakefront, to creating an hourly service that would link Whiting with Ridge Road at the cost of $146,000 per year. We think that's a very affordable cost for communities. And we'd love to see NERC be active in that conversation.
Did you have anything further, Mr. Ryan?
No, I don't have any questions.
Very well. The chair recognizes Commissioner Carnahan.
Every one of us here have vehicles, and I don't think we have any problem going anywhere we want. But I have compassion for people that can't go anywhere because they don't have transportation. South County Community Services, I work a food pantry in Cedar Lake every week, and they bring that bus there and drop people off and then come back and pick them up. If there's anything we can do, I'd like to see us do something. I'd hate for them to lose their service in that area. It's not my community, but I care about all of Northwest Indiana.
Mr. Chair.
I thank the Commissioner for his remarks. The chair will recognize Commissioner Tun.
Yes, I would endorse the comments made by Mr. Carnahan. I do feel that it's a matter of environmental justice that these services be provided. I would like to see NERC become as involved as appropriately as we can in this effort.
Thank you, Commissioner Tun. Mr. Chair, the chair recognizes the Commissioner from here.
I think that the opportunity for NERC really is as a convener. This is obviously the regional planning entity, and certainly any one of you could, in one of the communities laid out, could do that. But because of the regional nature of this conversation, it may be helpful for our executive director to at least host a meeting and facilitate that discussion and what that might look like. Because what I do know is that there are match dollars available that Gary is unable to spend, or federal dollars that are available that Gary is unable to spend because of the lack of a match. So this may be a tremendous opportunity for accessing funding that is going unspent.
I appreciate the comments of the Commissioner. Here's what it is the Chair's prerogative. One of the things I'm going to say in my report is that I realize the Chair has incredible prerogatives by custom and history here, none of which have been reduced to, they say it's policy, but until it's written, it's not. It's just practice. So if there is no objection by the body, I'm going to inquire of the Executive Director if he'd be willing to take up that suggestion and bring in the additional communities besides Maryville, to also meet with representatives of the Transportation Corporation, and so that there can actually be some numbers and what the exact ask is in terms of money. Is that an acceptable approach for everyone? Is there an objection? Commissioner Tanis?
Are we going to ensure the quality maintains from South Lake County services, community services? I mean, are they going to be coordinating with Gary at the same time? Is somebody going to oversee that coordination?
I hope you're here towards the end of the year when I'm going to be a presenter towards us and talk about my OptiGov idea, because that actually would embody that. But to your point, I think at this point, our best approach would be, in terms of organizational capacity, the suggestion of being a convener is an excellent idea, I think. That idea having been shared here will certainly be something that will be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Mr. Wright.
Just to clarify and provide some numbers, the $146,000 that I mentioned earlier, that would actually match federal funds that we have available. We began that service with the use of Job Access Reverse Commute funds, and those funds are still available, and we just don't have the money to match them as we anticipated. So yes, so not only are there actual numbers, $73,000 per year to preserve the Lakeshore South, $146,000 to extend it into Northern Hamlin Lighting, but it also is to stretch federal dollars that we've already got under control. And I'll pass out, I'll send to Mary the actual information with the maps and with the dollar figures for the commission. I'll do that as soon as I can.
Mr. Wright, I thank you. Did you have any further comments under the topic?
Just real quickly, there are about 40 communities over 70,000 in population in Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. All of them have public transportation. If we are unsuccessful in preserving the lakeshore system, there will be just one in that Fort County area, over 70,000 without public transportation. We would rather not have that quality of life issue.
I appreciate that. That's not a point that's lost on, I don't think, anyone here. Thank you very much. And I thank the commission for its grace in that topic. I would like to offer a report briefly. To begin, I had the honor and privilege of representing our organization on June 22nd at the ribbon cutting under the aegis of the mayor of Portage, Mayor Hobart, for the 61st Avenue or Street, depending on what you want to call it, their grand opening. That dedication, I was able to offer some remarks. It was also an exemplary program to talk about the importance of regionalism, because that nearly 1.1 mile stretch of 61st between Arizona and State Road 51 cost nearly $12.2 million. That would have been beyond the fiscal capacity of most communities. And the federal government share of that was nearly $9,325,000 plus. So that made that dollar investment, in terms of dollar for dollar investment, was huge. It's interesting to also think about the timetable for these things. That's why we have planners running the place. The program was actually selected in 2007 and let in May of 2015, and now consummated effectively this year. It's a beautiful place. It's got a roundabout, and although the staff will tell you it was a matter of cooperation between both the City of Hobart, the Lake County Commission, I can tell you that there was also private interest in that. The hospital at St. Mary's there was extremely important in being a convener and also being an encourager. And I happen to know the hospital administrator there. I served with her on the Red Cross board, and she loves the roundabout. She always encourages the mayor to love that roundabout. I was very happy because I was able to talk about Mesopotamia being the first place where we actually know a little bit about road development, which is a very Michael Griffin thing to do. I was glad to represent you. But I wanted to tell you that I was proud to do that, and it was nice to see a tangible expression of the power and value that the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission has in our three-county area. Also, if you will forbear me, we had a donor who will be nameless now. I'm going to ask, beginning with Attorney Hollenbeck, would you take one and pass those around? Commissioners, you're going to get a pin that looks almost identical to that logo. And this will be a protocol, a small task force that's going to be working on rules of order and some practices. But there is being passed around full-color pins. If you're a member of the commission, that will be what you'll get to signify your pride. I'm actually wearing mine. I've got to put that on. Yes, and so is our executive director. There's also a gold pin, and for those of you who are past chairs, you'll be getting a gold pin. So I'll make work of that, I hope, before you go. And the gold pin is really nice. Our goal is to actually draft a protocol so that that will become the custom. So we'll not only pass the gavel, but there'll be a passage of this pin. No public monies or federal monies, for that matter, or assets or resources of NERC were expended to obtain these. The hope is at some point down the line when these are exhausted that there'll be a new way to find them. But for the meantime, there should be sufficient there. And it's, albeit small, we thank you a million till we can pay you better. And that is one way of saying thank you, and also to show NERC pride, so we're not an invisible organization. And I thank the members. My last point for my report is that I do believe that we do need to adopt general rules of order. We don't really have a parliamentary authority. We behave like Roberts is that, but we've never formally adopted that. And the state law, although it does give some structure to our formation, what our authority is, it really says that we're to write our own bylaws, which I'm not sure we have reduced to writing. A lot of what we do is based on practice and custom, all of which can be valuable, but I think reducing that to writing, so I'm going to be part of a task force. I may be calling on some of you later on to be part of that. It would obviously have to be a work product that's adopted by the full commission, but these are some of the ways in which I hope that I can leave something that enhances this. There's an old oath that the Thebans took, the Delphic oracle back in ancient Greece, that among the many things is they wanted to leave Greece better than they found it, not just as good as they found it, but better. I think that while it's not about Greece, it's about our region. I hope all of us, in our individual ways, in the places we serve as elected officials, but also as officials here, want to leave our place better as well. So I hope that that will be something I can say as part of enhancement. That concludes my report, and I thank you for your forbearance. Now I recognize the Executive Director, the Venerable Ty Warner, for his report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. First of all, I just want to piggyback on the comments that our chair made about his comments for the 61st Avenue project. What I thought was so great about him being willing to speak at that event is you had true regional support going on of an elected official from another part of the region, praising the work going on in a community in another part of the region, and I thought that was fantastic. And the part, I don't know that, did you say this? A teacher came up to you and congratulated you on your veteran? Yeah, so that was very, I think, appropriate as well. I'm glad she was in the crowd. I want to thank those of you who were able to attend our open house after the meeting. I think it was June 15th, if I remember the date, with the forum and with Purdue. Great event to finally showcase the space here and what we've done in the offices now that everybody's moved in and the offices are finished. Really, really nice event, and a lot of folks came and appreciate every staff's effort in putting that together and making that go smoothly. If you haven't seen the rest of our offices and weren't able to make the open house, we'd be glad to take you through and show you how things are developed here. The federal folks are here and they'll have their moment of spotlight a bit later in the agenda, but just want to thank them for the last couple of days. It was great. And to thank staff for the tour that staff put together to showcase the things that are happening in our region. There's only so much you can do in a day, but we packed as much as we could into one day of travel, and really, really appreciate it. And Mr. Benson, thank you for your help via the News Learning Center in terms of the food and all of that. So thank you so much. Really great event. There was, related to the certification review, there was a social media survey, an email that went out for a survey, and if you received that and haven't done it, it only takes a couple minutes of your time, and strongly encourage you to go to that link and take that survey very quickly. That would be very, very helpful. Just a reminder that there's no meeting in August, so we'll begin in September, so you have August off. I've got a few staff awards to give for service, and if you'll permit me, there's three. And actually, if you, I'll just have you come up in succession. How about that? Can I embarrass you in that way? First of all, Kathy Luther is recognizing 10 years of service. Kathy, as you know, was our Director of Environmental Programs, and now our Chief. Now our Chief of Staff, so thank you, Kathy. While Kathy's coming up, also Amanda Pollard, who's our environmental educator, has also helped Gary with quarterly tracking and has helped a lot with tip development. And Amanda, thank you so much. I don't know what to say I'm sadly just received word this morning Amanda is moving on to another job. So I'm especially appreciative of her efforts, but she'll be leaving us as of I think at the beginning of August 4th. So very, very sad. And our last one is Sarah Ganaski. Is Sarah happen to still be here? Great. Sarah. Sarah has 5 years of service as our GIS analyst. She's phenomenal, has been a huge help. A lot of you have worked with her in producing and getting maps that you've needed, interpreting data, etc. Sarah's part-time with us now, as she's working at her master's degree at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So congratulations. Thanks. And then, last of all, because we're not meeting in August, this will be Gary Evers' last meeting as he retires at the end of August. So Gary has worked at NERC, I think, since September 1st, 1993. Does that sound right? So as you can imagine, and as you know, anybody who's worked with Gary knows how much is packed inside Gary's brain about projects all across this region. When we did our certification review tour, it was really obvious how much information is packed in there. And while I want to keep the focus on Gary, Joe Krznik is also retired from NICD. That's the position that Kelly Wenger took to take. They were both on the bus. And if you can imagine the combined historical outpouring, oh, Joe's right back there. Joe, I didn't even realize you came in. There's Joe. The outpouring of information on that bus, I learned a ton on that trip. But Gary's been a phenomenal help to us. He's been able to work with the communities, always ready to give a response to help keep things straight in terms of projects and numbers, and he keeps telling me how simple this is. I don't know that I really believe it. He keeps using the analogy of his mother, keeping envelopes and drawers to do her budget, of certain monies and certain envelopes. And he said, that's all it is. I'm taking money and figuring out what can go in what envelope. And I don't think it's quite that simple, but that goes to Gary's ability to be able to make something that's extremely complex workable. So we are truly going to miss him, and it's going to be very difficult to replace him. So Gary, thank you for all your service.
If the executive director will forbear me, on behalf of every commissioner, Peter Marshall, the late chaplain of the United States Senate, used to talk about how we seem to always talk about duration when we're talking about the span of a career or a span of a life. He thought we also need to be talking about its donation as well. And then the measure of whether or not your life was worthy of the donation as well as its duration was whether or not you will be missed. You will definitely be missed, and we're grateful both for the length of your duration and the quality of your donation here, Gary. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
And I thank the executive director. The next matter before us is a presentation on the subject of I-65 and US 30. This is the safety plan presentation, the work for which we've been talking about informally and sometimes formally. Rachel Architects and Butler Fairman Seifert are part of the process. And who is presenting?
I'm just introducing them.
I see.
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
In response of the 2040 plan goals and objectives and the initiative to have a better region, we have the goals to improve connectivity within the internal transportation network, also reduce congestion, improve the safety of non-motorized within the area. Also, we wanted to solve the issue of the mismatch of jobs and housing. So we identified the need to have a plan for the major shopping and employment area within the region, along the US 30 and 65, the regional mall area. This area needed a lot of improvements within the area to make it more safe. So we identified the funds through the HSIP, or the Highway Safety Improvement Program. It was funded 100%, and we were able to hire a consultant. So I have here today Leslie and James from Rachel Architects, and I have Chris from DFNS. They will present the US 30, all the findings and recommendations for this
God
area.
bless you all day.
Thank you.
And I do have a copy, while they're coming up, I do have a copy of the study. I can pass around if you'd like to flip through this. This was provided in a link to you electronically, but if you'd like to take a look at the actual physical copy, I'll start that. That looks very nice.
I beg your pardon. Thank you, Mom, for the introduction.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us today. My name is Leslie Roth. I'm an associate and senior urban planner with Ratio. I also have James Ciafe with me, landscape architect with Ratio, and Chris Wheatley from Butler Fairman Seifert. Today we're excited to present to you the findings of our report on the US 30 safety study. We're going to go through a few items with you today. We're going to start with the project schedule, move on to the project goals. Next, we'll give you some idea of the study area observations of the US 30 corridor. We had a significant public engagement program. We'll talk to you about what we heard from stakeholders, business owners, elected officials, and other stakeholders in the project area. Finally, we'll get into the policy recommendations, and we'll round out with implementation phasing and a preliminary cost estimate for those recommendations, and we'll open it up for questions. When we began the process, it was approximately 10 months long. The beginning of the process started out with data gathering, inventorying the area. We did a full analysis of all of the different elements and aspects in the US 30 corridor. The limits of the study were 73rd to 93rd, and then from Clay on the east to Mirabelle Road on the west. So it's quite a large study area that included a variety of land use elements. Our focus, of course, was the US 30 corridor, but as everyone in the room knows, this corridor really has regional implications, and so looking at many different elements to tie into other planning documents and coordinated efforts was important to the study as well. The 4 phases that we went through, as I mentioned, began with the inventory and analysis. Then we began the draft plan process. We refined the draft plan recommendations, and finally, we have an opportunity to present to you for adoption. As Iman mentioned, there were several project goals that this group was trying to accomplish during the course of the study of the corridor. The first one was to create an identity of the corridor. What we heard from many stakeholders during our public engagement was that people were traveling to the US 30 corridor to take advantage of South Lake Mall. There were a lot of people that lived and worked in the area and wanted to see this particular destination have a cohesive identity, not only for the US 30 corridor around the I-65 interchange, but in the region as a whole. The second goal was really to leverage the corridor's reputation as a regional destination. As I mentioned, many people travel from Chicago, from points south, and points all in the region, along the region, to this destination. And it was important to enhance this and leverage its existing identity as one of to attract additional desired development. Concurrent to that was connecting land uses. A lot of residents in the area had concerns about what their future role would be, what the future of residential development in the area. Similarly, with commercial development, being able to continue to attract desired development to the US 30 corridor was of importance, as well as continue the economic impact and vibrancy of the area as a whole. And lastly, to enhance multimodal access. As David Wright so eloquently discussed, that's public transportation and multimodal access, including bikes and pedestrians, is critical to the success of this area and being able to improve circulation and access for all users.
So when we began this process, we kind of took a step back and looked historically, is there anything significant transit related in this area? There actually is a pretty rich cultural history. The Good Roads movement started in the late 1800s because road quality was pretty poor. You can imagine trying to drive or ride a bike on poorly maintained dirt roads through rural America at the time. Not that great. So actually early advocates for this movement were actually bicyclists. So they wanted to create a network of standardized roads that would connect the U.S. And US 30 was the first transcontinental highway dedicated in 1913. It was a very kind of difficult process to get public support for highway projects at the time. So they named this the Lincoln Highway in order to kind of gain public support, and they would have likenesses of President Lincoln and statues of him along the whole stretch. The current US 30 is called the Lincoln Highway, but the original alignment was more towards the northern edge. The Highway 30 stretches from New York City in Times Square all the way to San Francisco in Lincoln Park. So this kind of has a large kind of stretch along the whole country. Another thing that they did to gain public support was create these ceiling miles that had very standard dimensions. They would place them strategically across the country so that people would say, wow, this is so much better, I can actually drive on this, and then they would advocate for those being connected, and pretty soon you'd have a full network. And one of those early standard miles was actually near here or near Dyer. So to design that, they actually got a lot of experts from across the country together, got all of their kind of brains together and tried to figure out what the best roadway section would be. They were very forward-thinking. They were thinking in 20, 30 years, what's traffic going to be like? What's technology going to be like? Let's design for that. They actually had regulations kind of against having a lot of signage and displays along these roadways, and they made sure to accommodate bicycles and pedestrians. So we kind of feel like that's a very rich history that we should kind of continue to push forward into the current design.
So along with those comments, we also looked at other challenges, opportunities, threats, and weaknesses within the corridor. As I mentioned previously, creating a cohesive identity, connecting to the rich cultural history, and to the region as a whole was something that we noticed was not as, it was a little bit of a challenge for the corridor at this time, so we wanted to make sure and address that. Also addressing safe routes. Connecting to the cultural history, the US 30 corridor, Lincoln Highway was about bikes from its very inception. And so we wanted to make sure to include cyclists and pedestrians in our thought process as we develop key recommendations for the corridor. Many of the comments that we heard from folks using the corridor was that it was very difficult to navigate. Overcoming those physical and visual barriers was something that we wanted to really begin to assess and improve upon to make the corridor more functional, as well as a more pleasant experience overall. As I mentioned previously, there's a lot of residents that actually live in and around the US 30 corridor within the boundaries of our study area. And we did talk to a lot of employees, but we also found that there was a significant jobs and housing mismatch. There were significant kind of differences between people who live and work in the corridor, and so we wanted to make sure and resolve those mismatches in our recommendations. Also within the corridor, we talked to a wide cross-section of demographics. Age particularly was an issue, and lack of connectivity between destinations was particularly prominent with seniors and the elderly trying to spend time in the corridor, have lunch, do their shopping, and driving around in the area was very difficult for them. So we wanted to make sure that our recommendations did address a wide cross-section of users of the corridor, and that the recommendations created a more safe and area that was easier to navigate. So we started by looking at crash data. We analyzed 18 intersections along the US 30 corridor. We looked at a 4-year study from 2012 to 2016, and what we saw was that there were over 2,000 studies within that 4-year period, but most of them were fender benders. There was not a lot of serious accidents. 14 of those within the US 30 corridor alone were cyclists or had a cyclist or pedestrian involved in crashes. But it's also important to note that within the study area as a whole, where I talked about a larger geography, 25% of all traffic incidents involved a pedestrian or cyclist. So as Iman mentioned, creating safety recommendations and finally the implementation of these recommendations is really important if we're committed as a region to having multimodal access and this corridor becoming a destination. We also looked at connections, for example, the C&O Trail and the extensions and the level of effort and resources that have been committed to connecting regional trail systems for bikes and pedestrians. The US 30 corridor, because it's a destination in the region, should also be able to take advantage of that. So mitigating the traffic issues was of primary importance to this study. What you're seeing in this slide, we thought this was important to understand, is when we dug a little bit deeper into the crash data and the types of crashes that we are seeing and the intersections where those crashes were happening, we found that there were the numbers of crash incidents can be broken up into 2 categories. One was same direction sideswipe, and the second one was rear end only. So what this data tells us really is that drivers are distracted, they have trouble navigating the area, they're very frustrated with the environment that they're experiencing along US 30, and being able to focus in on intersections within that area helped us understand where the effort should be focused and where the priority should be within the study area. So our recommendations for safety planning, which is kind of the reason behind the study, is we thought that improving signage and wayfinding in and around the corridor was of critical importance. In our stakeholder interviews in the workshops, and we'll get into the public engagement, we had hundreds of people actually online and in person talk with us about their experience navigating the area. One of the #1 things that surfaced was, how do I get around? How do I get to the destinations that I want to? If I want to go to more than one store, or if I want to spend more time in the area, how do I do that? So signage and wayfinding, helping people understand and navigate the area, was important. The second safety planning recommendation is evaluating the signal timing and signalization. Congestion was also at the top of everyone's list, particularly during rush hour. People were very frustrated with the signalization, with being able to move around the area. We mentioned that just in the mile stretch that we were looking at, there were 18 intersections. And on top of that, there are also additional curb cuts. So navigating the area and helping with the regulatory environment was important as well. Lane markings, visibility, directional signage, these were all also really important things that we thought would help with congestion and help people navigate the area safely and conveniently. Looking at what are the distances where these movements happen and how can we improve those movements was also another recommendation. Chris will speak to this as well in our analysis of each intersection. The next thing we looked at is reducing visual clutter. We want to make the driver experience easier to navigate as well as safer. When you're a distracted driver, it becomes very difficult to pay attention to the drivers around you as well as where you need to turn to get to reach your destination. So we wanted to look at ways of coordinating signage, giving a more uniform look and feel for the corridor, and improving its identity overall. And lastly, evaluating the interconnectedness of signals was important as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our public engagement and outreach strategy, what we heard from stakeholders in the area, and what we did to engage. So we had five steering committee meetings. We met just about every other month. The steering committee was made up of representatives from Hobart and Maryville, as well as GBTC and other predominant stakeholders in the area, business owners. It was a great cross-section that had a wide social network to make sure that the messages, the ideas, the policies, and the recommendations of this study were vetted carefully before being put into the report. We did some outreach to business leaders to understand their challenges, what was working in the area, how we could improve the economy of the area, and what they heard from their clients and customers as well. Concurrent to the face-to-face outreach process, we also had an online survey. We got over 200 responses to that survey. There were about 15 questions that ranged from where do you live, where do you work, where do you like to go in the area, how difficult is it for you to get around, where do you think the environment can be improved along the corridor, and these were all published online, surveys also online. We had 2 pop-up workshops where we gathered over 100 responses, and I'll talk to you more about those 2 workshops. We held them at South Lake Mall. We find that public engagement, when it's in an informal setting where people already are gathering, we actually have a better response. People are more willing to talk to us, and they don't have to go out of their way. So public engagement should be convenient. At our first workshop, we had several different exercises to walk people through as they came over to interact with us in the mall. We had a welcome station where we had a presentation of work done to date revolving on a monitor. We also had a visual preference survey where we had a variety of elements in picture form, analogy images or precedent images that people could vote on their preference. So we looked at gateways and wayfinding, we looked at pedestrian crossings, tunnels, and bridges. We looked at signage along the roadway and asked people to vote on what they thought was most appropriate for the area. The second station was origin and destination, so where are you coming from, where are you going? Interestingly, there were a lot of dots that were off the map, and we covered, a pretty wide area. But people were coming from all over, traveling, hour or 2 hours to come to South Lake Mall and to come to US 30 to take advantage of basically shopping, entertainment, restaurant dining. We looked at crossing and location preference. Where are people coming from? Where are they trying to go within the US 30 corridor? So kind of drilling down into what stores are you shopping at? Where are you going to eat? What does your day look like? How did you plan it out? And where are you trying to go? To help us understand where those intersection improvements needed to be made and where crossings over US 30 and over I-65, which is an even larger challenge, needed to be made. And then, as I mentioned, we had a presentation on the planning process. So from the survey, what we heard, some of the outcomes that we heard from stakeholders that engaged with this was that traffic was the greatest challenge. Congestion was a particular difficulty, and then walking from destinations safely was a third kind of top challenge. So the corridor was used for many things. The top 3 uses of the corridor were dining, shopping, and entertainment. And then when we asked participants what improvements were their top priorities, crosswalks, sidewalks, and bus shelters were their top priorities. So what this told us is that people really loved coming to the US 30 corridor. It's an incredibly important destination, and they wanted to use it as a district, not as a street or a one-off shopping area. They wanted to spend more time, ultimately more dollars, within the area. And so we were looking for recommendations that really were responsive to what we were hearing. So the next set of slides that you're going to see are recommendations that came out of these listening sessions with stakeholders, that came out of great advice from our steering committee that worked so hard to help us understand the corridor, and policy recommendations that really should be considered for implementation moving forward. So the first policy involves the street network and transit. As we mentioned before, congestion and how to move pedestrians, automobiles, and bikes successfully through the area was important. So the first key recommendation was to alleviate that congestion, and we'll talk to you about how we did that. The other one was to create safe crossings. We actually saw people walking their bikes along US 30 at the I-65 interchange. All of you have gone through this interchange. It's very, very dangerous for bikes, and so we wanted to make sure to get people through that intersection safely. And so we also looked at how to create separations between cars, bikes, and pedestrians, particularly along roads with a traffic volume of over 25,000 average daily traffic. So the map that you're seeing here has both proposed and existing projects identified. It's a little bit small. We have a larger map in the document itself. But the goals for this, for the recommendation, were ease of access. We wanted to make sure that people could move in and around the US 30 corridor. So we looked at bypass routes both on the north and south of US 30 to help get people through the I-65 interchange, as well as to destinations on to the east and west of it. We also wanted to reduce incidents. As I mentioned, there's a pretty significant pedestrian, bike, and automobile incident within the study area. So how to reduce that by separating modes of travel was very important. Improving circulation, particularly multimodal circulation, and coordinating the most highly used travel paths with improvements to the roadway system. All of these things are a response to the average daily traffic. We looked at first priority roads of 25,000 or more, but as you can see, most of the roads in the study area are very, very highly traveled. So it was important to also look at alternative mobility. One of the recommendations, particularly talking to aging demographic of people, we looked at aging in place, the residents in the area, was to provide a shopping shuttle. And this is going to be coordinated with GPTC, as David mentioned. It's very exciting that services being improved along Broadway, 50%, and it could be coordinated with the existing shuttle also along the US, the corridor itself. So a shopping shuttle allows people to park once. This is a strategy, it's a best practice that's used nationally in many, many areas, particularly shopping, entertainment, and retail districts. To park once and then use a shuttle to get you from business to business. The second one is looking at connecting retail and commercial destinations with a pedestrian network. So if people are able and they do want to walk, getting them to their next destination safely. And then looking at centralizing parking locations. This would be, of course, be in partnership with retail and commercial operators and businesses, franchises within the area, to make sure that those centralized locations were clearly identified with wayfinding signage as well. So this diagram shows the existing bus route. We worked really hard to understand the cost implications to a shopping shuttle, if this is going to be a joint effort between businesses, and coordinating with them on what their level of tolerance and effort were within cost, and also coordinating with GPTC in both coordinating with the private shuttle as well as improving headways for convenience. The response with 50% increase in service along Broadway is a response to that. People wanted, the headway times were a little bit too long, that folks that we talked to thought that it was inconvenient at the time. Talking to David, talking to GPTC, they understand that public transportation in this area is absolutely critical to the economic vitality, and so we're really excited about that.
To address one of our project goals of enhancing the multimodal access in the area and safety, we came up with a third policy of improving bike and pedestrian mobility within the corridor. And this is for users not only within the US 30 corridor, but those coming to it from the surrounding areas. So these recommendations included constructing grade separated structures at the location of I-65 and US 30, so people can be able to, non-motorized users can travel through that challenge of an area for them. Increase the connectivity between the residential areas and the key destinations within the corridor, and also to introduce multi-use trails and those side paths along US 30 that can be used by the non-motorized users. By doing this, we're going to improve those mobility options for the bike and pedestrians. This is a recommendation we came up with, a master plan for multi-use trails and sidewalks within the study area. You can see north and south of the I-65 and US 30 interchange, a couple of those grade separated structures, as well as a couple recommendations for grade separated structures for bike and pedestrians along US 30, both east and west of I-65. Another key point we wanted to focus on was really leveraging a great asset that Merrillville and Hobart already have with what's been constructed on the C&O Trail to this point. That's really a key corridor for bikes and pedestrians both in and out of this area. In order to provide connectivity to the corridor, both north and south of US 30, we focused on Broadway and Colorado to create the multi-use trails along that area that could be used to bring people to the corridor from the north and south. And then, as one of the key recommendations, is creating those multi-use trails along US 30 that can be used to travel safely and comfortably for the non-motorized users. And another recommendation you can see here are with the proposed new roadway alignments to provide those bypasses to US 30 along 79th and 93rd Avenue is to incorporate multi-use trails as those alignments become implemented as well. We created some cross sections of multiple areas within the study area to help people visualize how some of these improvements can be implemented within the existing footprints and in some of the green space that exists within the area. As you can see on the map to the upper left, this is on Broadway, and it's just north of 87th Avenue. And you can see in the upper right, that's a Google Earth shot of the area. This is showing how we can implement the multi-use trail and plantings, trees in the area to act as a buffer to between the traffic and the users along the trail. This is another example, and this is on US 30. This is just east of Broadway, and for reference, like Portillo's would be kind of on the right side as you're looking at the cross section here. This is another area where we are showing what could be constructed in this area by creating the multi-use trail, creating some of those plantings, and being recognizing that we've got to be respectful of the businesses and allowing the view shed back to their signs and back to those businesses so they're not obstructed from view of the users along that area. For policy, from the findings that we had in our public outreach, it was confirmed from those that responded to our outreach that they wanted crosswalks and they wanted safe options to overcome those challenges presented by traffic within the area, to be able to travel along the corridor. Intersections were a key location where those conflicts exist between bikes, pedestrians, and vehicles. So we came up with the recommendations of at some of the less congested intersections, creating safe at-grade crossings with crosswalks, ramps, pedestrian refuges. Next was at the more heavily traveled vehicular locations to create grade separated crossings with bridges or tunnels that could be used by the bikes and pedestrians. And then the last recommendation was to improve the intersections, US 30, with those more visible markings, signage, and plantings. This is a schematic kind of showing a location. This is at US 30 and the East Mall entrance. So for reference, Best Buy is on the north side of this schematic, Chili's and Chick-fil-A are on the south side. So this is showing what could be done with crosswalks. And as you can see, the crosswalks on US 30, there are pedestrian refuges in the median that are offset. And this is to encourage the pedestrians to make the crossing of US 30 in 2 cycles of the signal, just due to the length of that crossing. That'll help mitigate some of the impacts to traffic along US 30 and make it a more comfortable crossing for the pedestrians as well. On the right, you can see this is an example of a pedestrian refuge and some crosswalks in an urban area. This is another schematic, and this is located on the Mississippi in US 30. And this shows to the left, you can see an at-grade crossing of US 30. But then as well, just to the right of that, you can see a grade separated crossing using a bridge that could be constructed. So there's an option. We found in a lot of situations, bridges are constructed. Not all users choose to use those, so we do want to give those that are able-bodied or make that choice at-grade crossings such as we show here. This is another example at US 30 and Broadway on the west side of I-65. You can see another at-grade crossing, pedestrian refuges in the median, and then a couple different ideas of what can be done in some of these available green spaces. So on the north side, the upper part of the roadway, you can see a ramp that runs parallel to US 30 that could get those users from at grade to the bridge. And then on the south side, this is showing using a space between White Castle and Panera there as perpendicular to the US 30 corridor. This is one of the locations that we've shown for a possibility to cross I-65, and this could be a tunnel. This would be south of US 30 and south of the US 30 and I-65 interchange, near the 89th Avenue. The Red Roof Inn is just on the left for reference there. So this is a location that pedestrians and bicyclists could travel underneath I-65 to make that connection and to avoid the traffic and congestion at the interchange. This is a location that is north of the I-65 and US 30 interchange. The Star Plaza is on the left side here. So this is a potential location for both a new roadway and multi-use trail that could possibly be located under I-65 to make that connection. This would allow another bypass of that US 30 and I-65 interchange for local users to avoid some of the congestion there, as well as the multi-use users as well.
So we realize we've taken up a lot of your time, so we're going to quickly flip through the last three policies. Policy 5 is really about land use, and the big takeaway from this is we coordinated with the comprehensive plans from the town of Maryville and the city of Colbert just to make sure that the recommendations that we were making for additional development in the area were consistent with existing regulatory documents. As you can see with the future land use map, particularly in Colbert, that there are some proposed changes to land use in the area. We wanted to ensure that if additional mixed-use development, retail, commercial, or residential development was proposed in this area to increase density and therefore bring more people to the area that could potentially take advantage of the large number of jobs, that the land use plans were consistent with that goal.
Quickly for the public realm, currently the US 30 corridor is very car oriented, so we want to kind of make sure to make some improvements to make it more pedestrian scale, I guess, and enhance that experience for pedestrians and cyclists as well. So creating a series of kind of small public spaces that people feel that they can actually be in and use, using planting to create an identity and a brand to make it feel like this whole region, or this whole district is its own self-contained district, and then be more ecologically and socially active and resilient. Public space, there are a few kind of small parks in the area, but another area that could increase public space is the use of some parking, because there's a lot of parking lots in the area that aren't always used to their capacity. So is there an opportunity to have a small pop-up shop or restaurant or agriculture or parklets or something that could maybe use some of these parking spaces in the summer, and that would disappear, and you would still have full parking capacity in the winter for all the Christmas and holiday shopping. Is there also an opportunity to introduce solar panels or other green technology to help show this corridor as kind of a forward-thinking example of what can be done with these spaces? In terms of landscape and streetscape, the right-of-way along 65 and 30 is definitely the most area where you could have an impact. It would have to be coordinated with PennDOT, of course, but they do have a roadside heritage program that focuses on a lot of native plantings. It's great for stormwater management, urban heat island, pollinators, working with that kind of agricultural history of this area. Along all of the new proposed streets and paths in the lower left, you can see some planted that would kind of help as a buffer, create a better scale, using columnar trees that are very narrow and tall to kind of prevent blocked views for all the businesses. Parking lots, if there could be increased tree canopy or rain gardens or something like that be more sustainable and just less giant seas of asphalt, that would be great. Right above that in the center, you can see they're actually taking out some asphalt in certain areas and adding planting. Increased pavement or signage would also help kind of make this area better. This is kind of I was rendering what the area could look like. You can see the increased planting and trees along the 30 corridor. It helps with energy use, and there's also been a lot of studies that show consumers are willing to pay 9 to 12% more for goods and services in areas with increased tree canopy and plantings. So there's financial reasons to do that as well.
Our 7 policy recommendations, we look at utilities and infrastructure within the corridor study area. A couple of recommendations we came up with, reducing or looking at relocating some of the overhead utilities in the area away from the corridor or possibly burying them to reduce some visual clutter and also reduce some conflicts to the pedestrian improvements. Looking at implementing rain gardens in the center medians along US 30 where we can do that, and then making sure that these improvements would be coordinated with the plans that Merrillville and Holbert already have in place and plan in the future. This was just something we put together to give an idea of what this area could look like with some coordination that we did with NIPSCO, talking about possibilities for relocating some of those overhead utilities. And you can see in the lower picture, what this could look like, areas that we could put in native plantings, trails, and some trees due to reduce those conflicts by relocating those overhead utilities.
Implementation and phasing, we just took kind of a quick stab at looking at priority projects that would have the largest impact. This would obviously have to be coordinated with different funding and improvement projects that are existing. We did look at a number of funding sources, and those are in the full document. Construction cost opinion, this is very high level, looking at the major ticket items and kind of based on current costs, what that would add up to. It does not take into consideration a number of contingencies and some of the smaller ancillary projects that would have to happen as well.
And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for bearing with us. As you can see, it's quite a complex study that we embarked on, and we really appreciated the opportunity to work with NERC on it and hope that the recommendations will be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to point out when this group approved the study for this, we did it in the Radisson location, right there at that intersection, which of course is no longer there as you drive by, just proving how fast things actually can change, and the hope is that these policies can be implemented relatively quickly to improve that area.
We thank the presenters again. The next item of business in order is the report from the Finance and Personnel Committee, chaired by our treasurer, Karen Freeman Wilson. Madam Commissioner.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, and certainly to the members of the public. Just one item of information and then one item for a request for movement by this body. The information is good information, and that is that we had a clean audit with no exceptions. And just want to thank Angie Hayes and the entire team for her work to make that happen. Obviously, the State Board of Accounts did the audit, but she worked tirelessly through the year so that there would be a clean audit with no exceptions. I also want to make the members aware that the CAFR will be available electronically if you would like a paper copy. And we would certainly discourage that, but for those of you who insist on paper, then they will also make that available to you as well. But to make it available electronically does in fact save NERC some money. Relative to the motion on, there is a budget amendment, and this budget amendment actually is in reference to our ETIP. Earlier, you heard Ty talk about how much information and how knowledgeable Gary is, and a lot of that information is in his head. So this ETIP software would allow us to not only keep that information electronically, it would also make it possible for those member entities, those cities and towns that are members, to apply for grants and access that information electronically. So we are recommending that there be this new software purchased and that the budget be amended for the purchase of that new software, and that will be in the amount of $22,500.
Motion to approve.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to approve the recommended budget amendment as presented by the Finance and Budget Committee. Those proponents wish to speak in favor of the motion. Those any opposed wish to speak in opposition to the motion. Hearing none, as many as in favor, please say aye. Aye. As many opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion is passed. The amendment is adopted. The motion is adopted. Is there anything further in your report today?
That concludes my report. Yes, please.
And I thank the committee and its chair, its membership. The next business in order is the receipt of the Environmental Management Policy Committee report under the chairmanship of Vice Chair Jeff Benson.
On the Angie Hayes thing, I think it's 10 or 11 in a row that there have been no comments, so that's pretty amazing. Just for those keeping score. The Environmental Management Policy Committee did not meet in July. We are meeting in August, and we will be discussing or seeing a presentation of the NIPSCO LED streetlight replacement program there, so I encourage you all to come.
Yay!
9 o'clock in this first Thursday of August in this room. Thank you. That concludes my report.
And I appreciate your economy of language. Thank you. The next business in order is the Technical Planning Committee. Commissioner Breesky as its chair, a past chair. There you are. Don't forget your voting pin before you go.
The Technical Planning Committee met on July 11th and heard presentations. Staff presented on the air, water, and land quality goals of the 2040 comprehensive plan. Our reports are on page 9 through 20 of the packet you have. Is Steve Derek here? Or who's going to present on the public comment from the US 3065 that can be found on pages 11 and 12.
We have 30 days public comments. We received all positive comments, or if we have a request that was outside of the study area, but like we consider that for any future improvements, because like the US 30 I-65 is a typical plan that could be implemented on the rest of the US 30. So we have other recommendations coming from people also related to US 30. So we didn't make any changes because it was all positive comments. And should I move to the resolution? So we have the next one is the resolution 1716 to adopt the US 30 and I-65 study and to add that to our 2040 plan implementation as a guide. So I don't want to go anymore over the US 30. I know that you heard it enough, so if you like it and you wanted to adopt it, that would be great.
Thank you, Iman. The TPC committee recommends adoption of 1716. That resolution is on pages 15 and 16.
So moved.
With verve, it has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution 17-16. Are the proponents wishing to speak in its favor? Are there any opponents that wish to speak in opposition? Hearing none. As many as in favor of adoption, say aye. Aye. As many opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion passes. The resolution is adopted. Next matter.
The next action is on Resolution 1717 that can be found on pages 17 to 20. This is the First Amendment for fiscal year 2018-2021, and Gary Evers will make his last report to us. Go, Gary. And he will explain this action.
Amendment 1 to the 18 to 21, 25 years ago, 2021 seemed like a long way away, and we're almost there already. The town of Counce is requesting some additional funding for a pavement marking project town-wide. Griffith is requesting some additional funding for regulatory and warning signs, plus street name sign projects. And the final three actions on this page. On the first page are LaPorte County making some funding shifts from a demo project that they have to several other projects, primarily in northern LaPorte County. Town of Lowell was funded for some, received funding for bike rack project a few years ago. Didn't go anywhere. We brought it back, and it is in front of you today. And then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 NDOT projects at various locations throughout the region. These projects were in a prior TIP amendment in the old TIP. They didn't get let, so they're bumping them into 2018 here. This amendment was subjected to public comment, and no comments were received, and was reviewed by the Indiana Conformity Consultation Group for a conformity check, and they cleared that as well. So we do ask, and as well as TechDC, they're approved at that level as well. So we're asking for the board's approval to make this Amendment 1 a reality. Thank you.
It's good to see our towns are taking advantage of the opportunities this agency and the Highway Administration have to offer. The TPC recommends adoption of Resolution 1717.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for the adoption of Resolution 1717. Are the proponents willing to speak in favor? Hearing none, is there any opponents who wish to speak? Hearing none. As many as in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
As many opposed, vote no. The ayes have it. The resolution passes, the motion passes, and the resolution is adopted. Is there anything further to come before us from the committee?
The next meeting of TPC will be September 12th, 2017. There is no August meeting. And Gary, you're always welcome to come back and join us. Thank you.
I can see he cannot wait. He was just hoping for the invitation, Mr. Chairman. I thank the committee for its good work and its report today. I don't know that I see our colleague, the Venerable Blair Milo. She's not here. Is that not correct? So if there's no objection, is there somebody who's been selected to give a report from that committee in her stead? They're being...
Not specifically, but I believe the legislative committee was to meet Monday. At 1 o'clock.
Right. Yeah.
So I think, as far as I know, that's still on.
And everybody's invited that wants to come to that meeting.
Correct.
I'm going to have problems with that, but that's all right. Very good. Thank you for that report. Somebody's representing Mr. Powers from NDOT.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those of you that don't know, I'm Lindsay Quist. I'm the Capital Program Management Director for NDOT. Unfortunately, Mr. Powers could not be here today. I don't really have anything to report, so I'll open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Move along. Do we have people from the Federal Highway Administration? Hello.
Hi, I'm not on the phone today.
Yes, it's nice to see you in person.
This is Joyce Newland, who is often a disembodied voice on the call.
See, I don't have a name tag today.
Ms.
Do you
Newland,
want us to do this now, or you want to?
This is great.
Yes, please.
So if I could, maybe I'll take the opportunity to introduce Joyce Newland from Federal Highway, Susan Weber from the Federal Transit Administration, and Antonio Johnson, who's unfortunately was not on the agenda listed, but is also from the Federal Highway Administration. And we spent the last well, now 3 days with these fine people.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Gary and to Joe on your retirements. And I have really enjoyed working with you over the years. And I've really known Gary since he was with KRPC, the Kankakee Iroquois Regional Planning Commission. So we go back a long way. So thank you very much for everything you've done. And Joe, too, you as well. So anyway, thank you too to the, I wish this would go down, but thank you to NERC staff and Ty for organizing a wonderful tour. You know, we're a reviewer. As you know, I'm usually, participating by phone. So we had a tour and we went around the region, really got to see the projects in the plan and the TIP. And, that really just helps you, with your review, but also just get a sense of what's going on. And it was really neat to see how the 2040 plan, the livable communities, and all the efforts that are going on with that, and all the bike ped projects, and all that's going on with the transit projects that are in the works. So we really enjoyed that. I'd also like to thank NDOT for providing so many staff people to attend the on-site review yesterday. We had quite a bit of participation from NDOT, and very, very pleased that you guys were here too for the review. And I also like to thank the transit operators, because they also participated as well in the review, and that was a very good discussion. So thank you very much. As part of our process, we had a public meeting last night. We did hear a lot of concerns about social issues, and so that will be further detailed in our report. Again, accommodations again on your bike ped and your livable communities issues and initiatives. I think there's just a tremendous amount that's going on. As you know, Federal Highway Administration, USDOT, we've been promoting bike ped, and it's part of our strategic agenda. In 30 or 40 years, we'd like to see 0 deaths in bikes and pedestrians. And so that I-65 US 30 corridor initiative, that was really nice. And I'm hoping that there's some partnerships that happen out of that with NDOT, or our whole team rather. We've been hearing a lot about performance measures for quite a while, and USDOT has been able to finally get out of performance measures. And so this is something that NDOT and the MPOs, not only NERC, but all the MPOs in the state will need to work together to be working on their performance measures. And we'll be detailing that also in our report. We are going to be issuing one corrective action, and that is going to be on the Coordinated Public Transit Human Service Transportation Plan. That was a recommendation in our last certification review, and so it's something that really needs to get done, and so that's probably the one thing that we'll probably be issuing. But, we'll have other recommendations, and I'm just thinking about giving you a 15 to 20 minute slide. But also as part of our process, we are going to be taking public comment here on the planning process, and so that will start at 11 o'clock. Feel free to come and talk to us and send us an email. Susan and I and Antonio, we'd be happy to talk to you. So, you guys have that in?
No, you did a great job. If there's any questions right now.
Any questions, commissioners?
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Newland, Ms. Weber, Mr. Johnson, thank you all very much. I don't know if you had an opportunity to hear at the outset under the chairman's report, but we're going to have an ad hoc committee that's going to develop bylaws. I don't know if that's of interest to you.
It was going to be one of the recommendations.
Okay, well, we'll meet that then.
Thank you. Very good.
I'm on all of them.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you all again. The next business in order is other business. Does anyone have notice of something you wish to introduce? Mr. Saladay.
Let me just make a couple comments. First, the governor is traveling the state announcing the 5-year plan for state roads for the entire state. Part of our efforts this year were to be more transparent. So this is available online. This does not include over $300 million a year, close to $350 million a year being made available to locals. So this is not the entire thing. The entire plan is $30 billion over 20 years. The only plan bigger in the United States is California, which is $50 billion, all of which is debt. None of ours is debt. Now, because many of us are opposed to the Illinois model of finance,
I didn't know it was a model.
well, some folks think it's an ideal. We spent a great deal of time, 6 years, defining the problem. Now, Porter County will get about, as one that I know off the top of my head, in state road funding, about $40 million, 35 to 40. Does that ring any bells with the number you just heard? So I have to tell you that when I see the congestion at 35, at US 30 and I-65, and the answer is bike paths, I'm stunned. 6 years of work. We need in this region connectivity to offload roads like 30. And that's where we need to be spending our money and spending our time. I don't know anybody who's going to ride a bicycle down that path. So a lot of effort and a lot of money and a lot of political risk went into making this money available. That legislature meets every 2 years, and if we don't spend it wisely, it will go away.
I thank the Commissioner. Is there any other business that people wish to bring? I just will remind everybody that as a matter of course, all reports that were received today will be filed and placed on the public record for the Commission. It's now time for announcements. Who wishes to be recognized for that? Let's go to Mr. Carnahan.
First of all, I passed out a thing on South Shore Summer Music Festival. The first one will be held in Cedar Lake this Saturday night, 7:30, weather permitting. It'll be outside, and the conductor will make that determination about 1 o'clock if we should move it to the high school. Hopefully it's outside. One other thing. How many of you ever listened to Lakeshore Public Radio 89.1? They're in trouble. They're about $96 million in the red by September. They are, Mary's passed out some information, an urgent message from the CEO, and they're going to come up with some other ideas on how to raise money. Also, they've lost a lot of their corporate sponsors. And I told them, I sit on an advisory board, I said, you need to go revisit some of those corporate sponsors. I don't know, I turned on 89.1 when I was on my way here to see what kind of problems were on the road. I did hate the fact that 89.1 was a Christian broadcasting station before that became public radio. I like listening to it, but I now enjoy the radio. And an old song is "Don't It Always Seem to Go," that you don't know what it's got until it's gone. So I'm going to challenge everybody on city and town levels that if I give $100 additional money, which I've already given them some, will any of you follow suit, and let's see which city or town could be the biggest donor. I don't want it coming out of the taxpayers' money. I want it coming out of your personal money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carnahan. I know that I have two in the queue, Executive Director and then Jeff Benson.
You want me to go?
If it's related to that, you think it's more timely, please.
Yes, so it's a wonderful brochure, and there's one that's missing, and that's the August 4th one at the West Beach for the National Lakeshore, 7:30 p.m., and the rain location is Chesterton High School. So,
thank you.
Thank you. I just Well, I appreciate Representative Soliday's comments. I just thought it was worth perhaps making some clarification about the purpose of the study that we just adopted today versus past work that NERC does, just so it doesn't leave the impression as if we're not trying to act on expanding roadways or connections throughout Northwest Indiana. The safety study was specifically done with safety money that can only be used for safety projects. And it was trying to address an issue where people are already trying to cross the street and walk and bike and how to make that safer. So it was not an alternative to trying to increase capacity or improve roadways. We actually had done a regional corridor study earlier to address that very thing, to identify the gaps throughout Northwest Indiana where specific road improvements are necessary to make those connections and increase other paths for folks to take besides routes that they're already on. So just to make sure that's clear, it's not a resource decision about bike paths at the expense of road capacity. We are working on other studies to increase road capacity. This was a specific project to increase safety at US 30 and 65, so I just wanted to clarify that point.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair recognizes Mayor Wilson.
And to that point, while none of us would ever ride a bike, there are people who don't have a choice. So there are people who are riding bikes to work from communities throughout this region every day because they don't have an option. So that to the point of the safety aspect of the study and the need for the study is extremely important.
I thank those comments. Chair recognizes.
Mr. Chairman, Kerry Kirkham, LaPorte, Indiana, LaPorte County Council. I'd like to invite everybody to the city of LaPorte Saturday night. The local Rotary Club, who happens to be the chairman of that, is the mother of Miss Milo. And they are bringing in the Lake City Skiers, which is the only competitive water ski show in the state of Indiana. It's a free show on Saturday night on Pine Lake. You're all welcome to come, bring your lawn chairs and sit on the beach. They are actually blocking off the part of the road that goes around the park. And they'll have food concessions there, so we'd like to, since it's all free and it is the only competitive water ski show in the state of Indiana, we appreciate anybody who'd like to come.
We thank you for the announcement. Are there any further announcements for the membership?
Sure. One point on the missing connections point is the Pine Avenue bridge that we discussed as adding into our study is a huge gaping hole in the infrastructure in this area. I think it needs to be included in our study. Whoever owns it's a privately owned area now, but it connects to state roads. So I think that needs to be in our study. So I hope we can move forward on that resolution. I know we had something drafted, we're working on something, but I'd like to, my opinion, I'd like to see it sooner rather than later.
I thank the comment from the Commissioner. Commissioner Benson.
One other announcement, when there's a death, it's hard to invite people to the wedding. So there's a memorial service. It's actually a celebration of life for Dale Engquist, who was the superintendent of the National Park for 27 years. It will be August 5th from 11 to 2 at Dunes Learning Center. There will be a flyer that goes out, but it's hard to get the word out to people for this. So anyone who thinks they should be there is welcome.
Thanks for sharing. Is there any further announcements that the membership wishes to share? Hearing none then, and seeing that we have concluded all matters that are on the agenda, the chair declares the meeting adjourned.